We had someone that flew all the way from Montana. And actually, the night she was flying in, we were going to pick her up, and the flight got diverted to Little Rock, Arkansas. So she stayed there for a night, flew in the next day. So it's been a hard thing to get her in person here, but I'm really excited to have Quinlan Walthers here with us right now and the Nerd Stud team. Thanks for coming.
Oh man, it's an honor and a joy. Truly.
Well, I know we've been working together. We shot a bunch of videos earlier. I'm really excited about it. We've learned a little bit about you, but I want to dive into it a little bit. So just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, let's. So I'm a self-development coach, counselor. I like to work with people one-on-one, helping them intentionally build a life that they really love. Whether that's relationships, whether that's career, whether that's relationships with their family, whether that's a relationship with themselves. It's really about how can we develop ourselves into a version of us that we really like, and to do that intentionally. And that's my bread and butter.
What made you get into that?
I know what it's like to feel like you have so much potential, and not potential as in achievements, but potential as in I know there's so much more to life. There's more happiness, there's more connection, there's more love, there's just more. And you feel like it's so close but so far, right? And you turn all of that energy inward and you're like, why can't I just get this right? What the hell? Everyone else seems to have such an easier time. Like, I know what that's like. And it was my own personal journey through that, and kind of making I'll say a good amount of progress through that. We're not always there, right? There's no end, there's no destination, but seeing that there is a way through that, it just changed my whole life.
Well, tell me a little bit about your personal journey. I want to know more about that. And I think that's what connects with people, and the people watching is, what did you go through to get to where you are today?
Yeah, good question. So I lost my mother to cancer in my early 20s, and it was, probably the hardest thing that I've ever been through. And at the same time, it was such a catalyst for me to take action. Like, I knew that I wasn't happy with my life. I lost my mother, who was my best friend and who I also had a lot of conflict with. Like, there was a lot of inner child work there that I had to face in a really short period of time, knowing that she was going to pass. And then I was kind of left with a blank slate. So I took a look at my career. I took a look at what brought me joy, how I was treating myself, how I was treating other people, and really what happened for me, first and foremost, I was on the medical track. I got a degree in biochemistry, I took my MCAT, I was gonna be a doctor, which also had a lot to do with watching her go through treatment for years and years. So I had this moment, I was in my own therapy, I was looking at this long career ahead of me and looking at all the work that I'd done before, and I stopped and I asked myself, what do I want here? Like, I am so stressed. I am so mean to myself all the time. Nothing is good enough. No matter how much I achieve, no matter how much I do, I'm miserable. What is the point? And this reminded me of my mom too. She was a hard worker. She's the most badass businesswoman I've ever met in my life. And I watched her strive her whole life, or the time that we had together. Anyway, so I knew that with medicine, I wanted to help people feel good. I wanted to help people access more vitality rather than treating them when they're sick.
Right.
And I looked at the things in my life that have made me feel really good, and there is nothing that improved my quality of life more than therapy and more than coaching. I call her my therapist, but she's actually a Jungian analysis. She's a coach, like an achievement coach, if you will. And I decided from there, I need to switch paths. Like, I know what will fuel me, or I know why I want to do what I want to do. And it was there that I decided, okay, let's get into this self-development space. And
I love it.
Haven't looked back.
So right now you're working with clients one-on-one. Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yes, currently it's a one-on-one practice, and I work virtually. So I see all of my clients through Zoom. Typically we meet bi-weekly, sometimes on a weekly basis, depending on the client. And we basically customize a plan of action through our sessions for them specifically.
What are you seeing with your clients as like the number one, maybe top two needs when they're coming to you?
I see a lot of people who are frustrated with their romantic relationships, who feel almost helpless. They're either in a relationship that they really want to get out of, or they're in a relationship that they want to make work, but they're hitting roadblocks. I mean, lots of romantic relationship dynamics, and a lot of people who don't know what brings them joy. A lot of people, especially a lot of people who have achieved a lot of great external success, and they come and they say, it's not here. Like, I don't wake up happy. I have everything in the world around me except for the internal experience that I want to have.
What is that? Like, why do people feel that way? Like, what's missing?
It's a good question. I'd say it varies for a lot of people, but I don't think we're taught to take the time to slow down and really get to know ourselves. I think, at least in our culture, we're brought up with this idea that you need to jump into life. Like, you need to keep it together, you need to go to school, you need to get a job, you need to get out into the world, you need to get married and do the things. And that's usually by other people's standards, right?
Yep.
What do our parents want us to do? What will our friends think? You know, we follow the rules. And that usually leaves us at a place where, yeah, externally things may look fine, but internally we need more because the inside is screaming and we're not listening.
It's so good. And maybe this matches, but one thing that I say is, you know, people want to achieve and be their best selves, but I think for me in my life personally, maybe this isn't for everyone, but I had to stop and turn around and face the fire that I was running from before I could achieve and be who I wanted to be. Actually, facing it what made me redefine what even success was. And a part of that was dealing with a lot of childhood trauma. I learned a lot about the nervous system, my amygdala, which you're more of the professional on that. I've learned from people like you. So I want to dive into that. A lot of my videos that people like talk about the nervous system, the amygdala, and it all ties into like the people-pleasing videos and all that kind of stuff because it's a survival response. Can you talk more about the nervous system?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a saying that you can only express the identity that your nervous system feels safe in.
Yep.
And there's a lot to unpack in that. But essentially what it really boils down to, and you and I have talked about this quote quite a few times, is that you will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven.
Yep.
And the idea here is nervous system work is so important because we deal with it on a daily basis and we may not even pay attention to it, right? So essentially, to answer your question, nervous system regulation boils down to assessing triggers, assessing stressors. If we have a dysregulated nervous system, a small, tiny stressor that doesn't actually bring any legitimate threat will feel like we are being attacked or chased, right? Fight or flight, gotta run. There's also freeze, which is a dissociation where we kind of numb. There's fawn as well, which is let me kind of make sure everything is nice around me. A lot of people pleasers tend to do this.
That's like, me.
Let me just withdraw, right? And make sure everyone else is good, and then I'll feel safe. And the thing with nervous system regulation is that if you don't pay attention to how you're actually feeling, then your responses will run your life.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
How can people watching like get their nervous system to regulate?
Yeah.
Like, I think for me, you know, I didn't have any of this information when I was going through what I was going through with drug addiction and, you know, waking up. I always said I would wake up and it feel like I was being chased by a bear. And waking up triggered me, which I don't know. I think it goes back to being in college and playing football and us having excruciating morning workouts. I think that was one thing that maybe was in my mind and like the performance side of that. But I felt like no matter what I tried to do, number one, I was too far into the addiction to like really feel what I needed to feel. And so I never would let myself get to that point. But if someone's in that position or in a position where they're like, yo, like I need to like figure this out because I don't feel okay. Like I'm waking up in the morning and I feel like I'm being chased by a bear. What are some things that they can do to help themselves?
So first, I think it's important to understand that at the very core of nervous system regulation is the effort to, well, dysregulation is the effort to avoid feeling a feeling that you don't want to feel. So there is a core feeling that subconsciously you have deemed too difficult, too big, too overwhelming, too scary to face, and you will do anything that you can in your power to avoid feeling that feeling. So in IFS, the way that we break this down it is through 3 different things. Number 1, you have managers. Managers are a set of behaviors that manage the life around you. They try to keep things nice and pretty so that you don't have to go in and feel the big feelings. The managers can be things like perfectionism or being a high achiever, an overachiever, people pleasing, also a manager part. And that manager part is protecting you from the feeling that it thinks is big and scary. When the managers fail or are no longer working, we feel like we've lost control. That's where firefighters kick in. And the firefighting part is kind of like a last-ditch effort to avoid the feeling like, oh my God, it's getting closer, we can't feel that. That's where things like addiction come in. That's where things like eating disorders come in. People who compulsively shop, spend a lot of money. Anything that you can to distract yourself, including doom scrolling. That's another thing, right? How can I distract myself and disassociate here? And all of it is in effort to avoid feeling the big feeling. But here's the thing, JB. It's a feeling that we have associated a story to, that we have associated a narrative with.
That's good.
So if we can realize that our behaviors are trying to pull us away from this big, scary feeling, we can slow the pattern down. So to answer your question a bit more directly, if we can realize that our nervous feelings, our anxiety, our fear, our whatever, are connected to some belief that we have, we just have to settle into it. Awareness first, and then sit with it. That's where breath work comes in handy. So you say, okay, I have this feeling of anxiety. It's in my chest. Let me sit down with this. Let me breathe into it. Really breathe into it, focusing on the feeling rather than the narrative or the meaning that we're pairing to it, right? With that, you can integrate that this feeling is okay for me to hold. You are literally expanding your nervous system's capacity to hold big feelings. So it's like, I don't want to feel this fear, but I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do it anyway, even in little increments. And this is where therapy comes into play, or working with a coach or someone, because it can be hard to do by yourself at first.
Yes.
So somatic experiencing, feeling your feelings, breath work, which box breathing is great. The physiological sigh is great. Can't recommend more. You can also change your physiology as you're triggered. So that can be things like going for a walk. We've talked about that lateralized eye movement. So kind of increasing your optic flow. And for those who don't know, if you're anxious or triggered, you can go outside and physically move yourself. Great idea. And make sure that you're kind of scanning the horizon, like looking right to left, and that will calm the amygdala for you as well. There's journaling, there's gratitude, there's grounding, getting outside, getting your feet in the grass, being with someone that you're comfortable with. You can actually co-regulate with their nervous system, and if their nervous system is calm, it can help soothe yours.
Wow.
So lots of tools, lots of explanation, but I think that's a good view.
What if that feeling is just so excruciating, like that you feel like this is impossible to feel? Like I've tried to sit with it and I can't.
That's common.
Yeah.
It makes sense. That part of you that is afraid of the feeling is a much younger, much more vulnerable part of you. That part of you genuinely doesn't believe that it would survive, or that it would be likely to survive if you didn't do the things that you were doing to avoid the feeling.
Yep.
This is where inner child work can come into play. So if you can connect with that fear that says, no, I can't even open that door. Okay, why? Like, what do you think is behind that door? We don't have to open it yet. Let's just talk about it. And this is an internal dialogue that you can have with yourself. And again, in session with a professional can be helpful as well. But what do you think is behind that door? Like, what happens if you no longer use substances? What happens if you get fired? What happens if your partner leaves you? What happens if you can't control the situation as well as you want to? What happens if all of that goes away? And just have that conversation.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. So I wanna dive into this when it comes to people pleasing. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I don't know if you are, but a lot of my followers are recovering people pleasers. Can you explain maybe why this comes about? Like, I saw a quote that said, parent pleasers are people pleasers. But why did I end up like that? That's weird to me.
I think that it's a great quote. Yes, parent pleasers become people pleasers.
Yep.
A lot of those tendencies are learned quite early in life. And what that strategy does essentially is says, if I can make sure everyone else around me is taken care of, then I'll be safe. If I can control the external environment, no one will leave me. No one will leave me. I will be able to maintain love and safety and connection. I won't have to face this world all alone, because that's terrifying, right?
So if that is like, that's what I have to do, what caused that need in me to do that? Was it maybe the environment that I was in was crazy and I didn't know what to expect from the people raising me, or what does that look like?
Likely, more than likely. A lot of it has to do with the environment, the way that your parents reacted to you.
Okay.
There's also the chance that maybe you didn't feel seen or heard when you were young. Maybe it was that you felt, if I neglected my needs or if I asked for less, then I wouldn't feel the rejection of asking for too much, and maybe some of my needs would be met. So if I ask for less, I'll receive just enough.
Yep.
And so that became...
So it's deeply subconscious in you, like, and you're reacting this way, which is crazy.
Deep programming. Yeah, absolutely.
How does that fall into relationships? Like, if I'm dealing with all this stuff inside of me and really I haven't dealt with it, how can that manifest in relationships?
I like to say a relationship should be an added bonus to a life that you already love. And if we don't feel, to some extent, life is never perfect, right? Let's just throw that out the window. But if you truly can't fill a lot of your needs by yourself, if you really can't do a lot of that validating for yourself by yourself, you will seek that validation and that reassurance and that reflection from the people that you're in relationship with. And that turns into a codependent disaster. And the reality is you can work your way out of that. You can change your behaviors with self-awareness, but the things that we refuse to take accountability for, we will naturally push off to the people that we love. Yep. And that can cause us to feel isolated or rejected. That can cause us to put unnecessary expectations on those, which leads to more disappointment when they don't live up to our expectations, right? But I think it's important to point out that we are always trying to establish love, safety, and belonging. Mm-hmm. Always. Even the most vindictive, ugly, aggressive behavior that we have, it's a response to trying to get our needs met. Mm-hmm. And so in relationship, if you can say, I don't like this pattern, I don't like this pattern, I don't like this pattern about ourselves, do a little bit of work around that. Just some awareness. Just what am I trying to do here? What am I trying to feel? What part of me is scared? What part of me needs more attention? And you can do that work in relationship. You don't have to be fully healed before you get into a relationship, but you have to have the awareness and the accountability that says, I need to work on these things for myself so I can show up as the partner that I want to be.
That's so good. Can you give some examples of what maybe codependent behavior would look like?
So codependent behavior really says, I'm not okay unless you're okay. So if you're not okay, then I'm really not okay, and I have to fix it for both of us. Yep. And that looks like self-abandoning. So if you speak
I think
up,
I'm guilty of this. My wife's sitting over there, so I know she's thinking the same thing.
Poor Chloe. We love Chloe. Yes, the codependent dynamic just it builds resentment. If you are constantly forgoing the things that you want and things that you need to placate to the other person, you might think with your head that that's all good and great because they're happy, so I'm happy. That shit's living in you. Yep. That is, it builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and then eventually you say, I give everything to you. I would lay down and die to make you happy. Why don't you give that to me? Yep. Well, a lot of the time, that's not what was asked for. Yeah. You gave 10 times more than you needed, and now you're angry that you're not getting it back in return. Right. That wasn't the agreement. Yep. So boundaries. That's where
I love it.
boundaries come in.
Well, how can people follow you and get in touch with you?
My Instagram, at Quinlan, Quinlan, Walther, Walther. And looks like we'll be putting out a few pieces of content between the two of us too.
Yes, we are. And this is the last question. If someone's struggling right now, if you could give them 3 things to do, what would it be?
My advice to people who are struggling right now is, number 1, you don't have to do this work alone.
Yep.
We are not designed to be isolated, individualistic. Our society often tells us otherwise, but you don't have to do all this alone. Number 2, I would root yourself in gratitude. I wish it was less cliche, but what you focus on, you will breed more of. It's the truth. And you don't have to discount. I'm not talking toxic gratitude, toxic positivity. Truly, what are the things right now that do bring you joy in life? Focus on that. And the last thing would be a reminder that you have agency. You do have choice. And those choices here may be terrifying to you. I totally understand that. But action is important. You can make decisions. Things can get better. You can take 2 steps forward, take a step back, rinse and repeat. You have the ability to change your circumstances. Be patient, be kind, be compassionate to yourself. You have agency.
Because you can't hate yourself to change. You got to love yourself to change.
Can't hate yourself to change.
Thank you for the conversation. It's going to be awesome. So thanks for coming. Yep.
Appreciate it.